down, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
Transformers is one of those things that seems very weird from the outset, but when you actually get into it, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of people love to look at Japanese-only things, in fact, Japanese culture as a whole, and deem it weird, but that's a very reductive way of looking at it. A lot of it makes sense in the context of its own culture. For instance, Q-Transformers is a throwback to Choro Q, also known as penny racers in the West. And as a celebration of the franchise, as an anniversary line, it's kind of cool to see them go back to that. See them go back to some of those micro-change roots, mimicking the penny racers, mimicking Choro Q, and making a whole line of modernized Q Transformers. But then they made a show for it, and then we got figures accurate to the show. You can kind of see on the screen here, it is a very limited show. In fact, large portions of it are ad-libbed and just the actors making jokes. It's sort of a comedy segment. It is Flash animation, in essence. It's not actually using Flash, but it's that Flash style. So what happens when you try to make something accurate to that? Why would you even do that to begin with? And how does it turn out? Now, looking at this right off the bat, you may not initially see what's wrong with it. And not a lot of what's wrong even applies to the vehicle mode, but there are things we can glean. Basically, I want to bring in Soundwave from the last series so that I can do some comparisons. Soundwave is very much emblematic of the line as a whole. He's incredibly premium, he's incredibly shiny, he's got lots of little details on him. You can tell they put in as much effort as they could. But when we take a look at Bumblebee here, he's going for a very different style. See, this version of Bumblebee came a lot later in Q-Transformers' life cycle. He was based on the show, not the actual vehicles. And you know when Masterpiece tries to be really toon accurate, but it ultimately ends up being really cheap? Well, this is kind of like that, only turned up to 11. There's effort put into this thing, but it's really in all the wrong places. The front of the car is very toon accurate, but as a result, the stripes have been moved to the side. So you're left with a great big swath of yellow on the top, and this yellow feels really cheap. It both looks really cheap and it feels really cheap. Instead of having that lovely metallic fleck that you saw with the other Q Transformers, this just looks like mustard left out in the sun. It doesn't come across on camera very well. The camera makes it look a lot shinier than it actually is. But in person, it just comes across as really dull. The front's painted very crisply, but it's missing a lot of the details the other Q Transformers had. I like that the lights are done in metallic blue, and they're kind of done well, but the rest of the detail is just completely missing. And like, you look at the wheels, and it's the same thing. Because they're going toon accurate, there's just no detail here. Compare that to Soundwave, who's got nice, lovely wheel rims with a yellow there to mimic the speakers on a cassette player. And then here it's just discs. Granted, they're still pins, so they're still kind of fun to roll around, but it just feels underdone compared to everything else. And then towards the back, the red's just done very sloppily. Black's done crisply, I mean, that would make sense. I mean, there's black all around this thing and it's done quite well. But that red is just completely sloppy. I like that they've given some grey on the bottom, that's a very nice touch. But in general, the vehicle mode just feels very haphazard. They're going for a toon style, they're going for exactly how he looked in the Q Transformers show, and I do understand that. But as a result, it's just not that visually interesting in vehicle mode. But that's not where most of the faults lie. Most of the faults lie in the robot mode, so there's no use dilly-dallying. Anywho, size-wise, he's roughly 5 centimeters by 3 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters. And for comparisons, here he is next to a standard Legion figure, a standard Core Class figure, a standard modern Micromaster, a standard modern Minicon, a not-so-standard Lego minifigure, and Crumbs. I don't have any complaints with the transformation. It's basically Q Transformers simple. It does what it's supposed to, so yay. First thing you want to do is come to the bottom and bring these feet out like so. Separate these sections here. Bring them all the way to the front and they should click into place. Bring the arms down like so. And then you push up this and, oh, it doesn't actually work with the automorph like the others. Instead, you have to manually push up the head. Not something I'm too fussed about, but it is a bit annoying. And this is where we start getting into some of the bigger issues. The big one that makes itself known immediately is the grey paint. This paint is the chalky, scrapable type. Not only does it look cheaper than any other paint they could have used, but it chips off incredibly easily. It sort of tries to go for a matte finish, but it fails. I have always hated this shade from day one, and it keeps popping up on figures, and I'm just so sick of it. It's not a specific color thing, it's shown up in many different colors, and every single time I hate it. And it's everywhere too. It's all over the face, it's on the fists, and it's even on the legs as well. It just all reveals itself when you go to transform the thing, and it just really makes this thing look ugly. Not that the face sculpt does any better, it honestly looks like a KO. I get what they're going for, I know it's toon accurate, but some things don't necessarily translate well from cartoon to toy. And this is one of them. They've taken a flat image and tried to 3D-ify it, and it just does not work. It doesn't even look like Bumblebee. It's got none of the character from the show, because they've tried to be accurate to a fault with it. And if you think that's bad, the thing's hollow from the back. This wasn't an issue with any of the other Q Transformers. It's just a thing on the toon accurate ones. Oh yeah, sure, just make the head more hollow than Kingdom Hot Rod. That's gonna go well. I just don't know what they thought with this figure, and I mean, there's no real excuse for it. They could have used gunmetal. I mean, the gun literally uses gunmetal. But no, they went for the gray because it's toon accurate. You. They chose a really cheap shade of yellow. They got rid of a lot of the details to be toon accurate. They gave us a really ugly face. Even the red Autobot symbol there is just awful. It barely looks like an Autobot symbol, and it's messy as shit. And I realize that red is a very difficult color to do. I realize that it causes problems because of how many coats you need. But that's Zeta levels of bad. Like, what the f*** are you doing? I don't think this is acceptable. I just don't. Articulation's fine, I suppose. The head has a swivel, hinges and ball joints on the shoulders, and an elbow here, and then 2 ball joints on each leg, so it's as good as the other Q Transformers figures. But articulation's not why you buy Q Transformers. It's visual appeal, and this just does not have that. All this is giving you is failed accuracy to a flash animation. It's a flash animation, it should be easy, and yet it fucks up immensely. What are you doing? What the f*** are you doing? Anyway, I don't want to see his ugly mug anymore, so he is 5.5 centimeters wide and tall. He's about as wide as he is tall, which I don't particularly take any issue with because it's a Q Transformer. My issue is that he's shit, not that he's wide. And to finish off, here he is next to a standard Legion figure, a standard Core Class figure, a standard modern Micromaster, a standard modern Minicon, a not so standard Lego minifigure, and crumbs. I know I might be seeming like I'm overreacting, but I feel this is just a terrible idea. I get the drive for toon accuracy, but the great thing about Q Transformers was the realism, was the metallic finishes, was all of those details that matched up with the real vehicles. Just like Choro Q originally, those were mostly accurate to the original vehicles. You were getting small chibified versions of those vehicles, and then Q comes along and makes Transformers versions of that. That's what's so brilliant. This figure is the equivalent of obsessive Sunbow accuracy, being accurate to something that is purposefully cheap. And as a result, it just loses any and all pizzazz from the original. I know this might seem like I'm complaining a lot about something inconsequential, but this particular figure has always pissed me off. In fact, even looking at these figures on screen, you can see they're just made so much better. With this stop motion thing that literally just came up as I was filming, these look so much better painted. Why do they need to make them screen accurate? Why do they need to go to the trouble of this? It just seems like it's at odds with the ethos of Q Transformers. I might be complaining too much. I might be making a mountain out of a molehill, but I genuinely dislike this figure. I genuinely hate it. I do want to get more Q Transformers someday, but definitely not in this style. Thank you very much. Enough of this bullshit. Let's just move up to some core class stuff to get my mind off it. Tomorrow, we take a look at a couple of figures that are essentially apology pieces. Hasbro f***ed up, so they basically redo the figures in a way that fans would actually enjoy. But does that actually make them worth it? See you tomorrow!